Hello, Fusionistas. I just made up that word. Today's lesson, which I may show you live, but I thought I'd pre-record, has to do with moving, copying, and rotating primitives. And then your assignment is going to be to make a snowman. So I thought I would just show you how to make a snowman and then emphasize when I'm moving, copying, or rotating stuff. So a snowman, clearly we're going to want a sphere primitive. So I'm going to click sphere. You learned the other day that you got to click the floor before you start. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but it's really a good idea to draw things from like an intersection point instead of just a random place. I tend to draw from the origin. So I think I'm going to have my bottom circle be 60. And then again, to complete a shape, you need to click OK. Now, it might seem like this is a good idea to copy this, but I'm not going to, because when you copy, it's more difficult to change the size of a copied item. So I'm just going to make another sphere. I'm going to make two more spheres, as a matter of fact. I'm going to make them both on the bottom. I'm going to make one that's 50. Click OK. Create one more. Click the floor. Click over here, and I'm going to keep that 40. So now I'm at a point where I need to move these on top of each other. And I also I'm going to open bodies here. I'm going to name these bodies to emphasize later. It's absolutely fine if you don't name your different bodies, but this is the bottom. This is going to be the middle. And this is the top. Okay, so if I right click on this, you can see the whole thing automatically gets selected. That detail will be important later. So for spheres, you can just right click directly on it and go to move copy. Now it's really hard moving in 3D space because you can't actually tell where you are. Like this looks like it's could be over it, but if you check it out from a different perspective, it's not. So I'm going to show you what I highly recommend doing in a moment. First, I want to tell you what all these symbols mean. This middle symbol will let you move it freely on any plane. In fact, that's the one I recommend you don't use because it's really hard to keep track of where you are. This will move it on these two planes, the upper arrow and the sideways arrow. So even though it might look like it's moving on the red axis, it's not. Okay. Same thing with this square. It only moves on those two arrows. And then this floor one's pretty handy because it doesn't change your Y. It doesn't change your up and down distance. It only moves it along the floor plane or something parallel to the floor plane. What I tend to use the most are the arrows because the arrows will only move in one direction. So if I only want to move it up and down, use that top arrow. If you only want to move it around the red axis, use that arrow, and then this arrow moves it around the blue axis. It might seem like it takes longer moving it with the arrows because you got to do each axis at a time, but you get a lot more accuracy and a lot less frustration. So tip number one is when you move, try to stick to the arrows. Tip number two is it is impossible. That might be too strong of a word, but it's really difficult to try to position something without changing how you're viewing it. So what I recommend, anytime I want to move something on top of something else, I always look at it from the top. So if I go up here to my navigation cube and look at it from the top, I know I said I always move by arrow, but in this case, it's also pretty easy to move that with this square because it's only moving it on that plane that's parallel to the ground. Now I can tell you something else, although that's not going to matter here. I positioned it at the origin. So if I was able to, actually, let me see. No, I don't want to use that. You're better off not. You're better off not changing off of this. Keep it on the free move type. You can see mine's not exactly in the middle, and when I move it, it snaps really far. If you zoom in, the snapping is in smaller increments. It's still not snapping to the position I want. This one, this square, will let you get it snapped pretty well. So you can see that's pretty well centered over my bottom sphere. But I'm going to switch back to home view. You can see that it's still well above it. So instead of, I can move up and down from here, but I'll get a better angle if I look at it from either the right or the front. I'm going to go to the front, and then I'm going to move this down. I'm going to zoom in more so it moves in smaller increments. And again, if I, there, I'm going to have it intersect a little. So I like the positioning of that, and watch, when I go to the right, it's still centered. And the reason why it's centered nicely is because I started in the top view. So that one's pretty well centered. I'm going to go back to my home position, and I'm going to hit enter to place that sphere. And you can see there's still different bodies. I'm only pointing that out because of stuff we'll do later in the course. Now I'm going to right click this smallest sphere, go to move copy. I'm going to go directly to the top view and use this. And then I'm going to zoom in more. And I automatically use my mouse to do this, but when I want to center this in front of me, it's the pan tool. So now I can move this, and I think that looks pretty well centered. So I'm going to flip to the front face and zoom out a little bit, and you can see that it's still on the floor. So the reason I'm not using this is because I might accidentally shift it to the right, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to pull this straight up. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. And I think I want to pull it down a tad. Okay, it's going between 90 and 85. Maybe I want 87. So I'm going to type in 87. Okay, and I like how that works. I'm going to flip back to there. And since Fusion doesn't save for us, I'm going to go ahead and click save. And I'm going to type Snowman. I'm going to do VL for virtual learning. This will save in the cloud. I would really recommend not dealing with the location at all. Just click save. Okay, so we have the good foundations of the snowman. I need to check and see how much recording time I have. I'm going to stop at this point and make this a multiple video series. So when I come back, we'll put a hat on them and we'll get arms and a face. So that's the start of it. Hope it goes well for you. Remember that if something goes wrong, sometimes it's just worth undoing and redoing, because it can get, it's easy to, when you're trying to fix something, make another mistake. So if you find yourself in a position where something's kind of wacky, hit escape to cancel and just redo it, or use Control Z to undo and then just redo it. So take it slow, it'll work. See you in the next section.